Almadina, thank you very much. Thanks also to Stephen and Sarah for inviting me to share a few big picture thoughts about the rule of law with you this morning and what may lie ahead. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, as 24 countries were declaring their independence from Soviet rule, we talked mostly about the absence of the rule of law. Since that time, there have been impressive efforts to develop affirmative definitions of the term. We now know that the rule of law is not a self-defining term. Rather, it is a shorthand phrase that references essential characteristics of rule of law societies. We've also learned from the Magna Carta, the U.S. Constitution, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, that the underlying premise of the rule of law is that the ultimate power of a society rests not with the government, but with its people. It is the people who delegate powers to their government, who can limit those powers or replace their government altogether. This means, by definition, that countries with authoritarian governments are not rule of law societies, regardless of what they may claim. In his classic book, The Rule of Law, Tom Bingham describes arbitrary government power as the antithesis of the rule of law. Bingham and others have provided helpful definitions. Most definitions include that the powers of the government are limited by a variety of mechanisms, and that the government itself is not above the law. Laws are developed openly, are accessible, and protect fundamental human and individual rights. Courts are independent, with judges who are ethical, impartial, and apolitical, and official corruption is not tolerated. These definitions all show us that it takes more than just a short sentence to define the term, the rule of law. And we've learned other lessons. We know that in the 1990s, we often underestimated the immense complexities of transitioning from authoritarian rule to a rule of law society. It is not simply a matter of writing a new constitution and new laws. It requires new institutions, new roles for government officials, different public attitudes and expectations, new traditions, and mutual trust. Political and cultural changes that can require years or a generation or more. Transitions are even more difficult if the citizens of a country have not previously lived under the rule of law, or if reform brings about fundamental changes in their economy, which is usually the case. And if an existing government is authoritarian and determined to retain power by any means necessary, fighting for change can be life-threatening. Finally, we have also been reminded that consistently living up to the rule of law and its principles is a tall order. Ensuring that, in fact, laws protect basic freedoms, apply equally to all, that elections are fair and final, that courts operate impartially. These can be demanding objectives for any country. In short, implementing the rule of law is not a simple task. Transitions predictably entail uneven progress, backsliding, cycles of reform. Slippage can occur in the best of countries. So, what lies ahead? We have all seen reports showing net declines worldwide in the rule of law. But these surveys often ignore critical factors that suggest instead quite a different future. Consider the following. Although annual fluctuations can be important, a longer view sometimes tells us more. For example, before the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, 24 Central European and Eurasian countries lived under authoritarian communist rule. Today, 2/3 of those countries are ranked in the upper half of the global Rule of Law Index. 4 rank higher than the United States, 3 higher than France. They all rank higher than Russia. Moreover, 2 of the 5 countries in the world whose rankings have improved the most this last year were Bulgaria and Slovenia. 3 of the 5 that have improved the most since the year 2016 are also in Central Europe and Eurasia: Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Moldova. And Poland's recent election suggests that maybe more is to come. Also remember that rule of law surveys rank countries on their performance, not on the aspirations of their people. Public demonstrations against government abuses and suppression of dissent are most common in authoritarian countries. A telling indicator of popular sentiment is international immigration, which is driven worldwide by people fleeing countries in which the rule of law does not exist, headed for countries that respect the rule of law and enjoy its economic benefits. And most enduring is the powerful appeal of rule of law principles. The universal allure of personal freedom, basic human rights, honest courts, and accountable government is irrepressible. We don't see demonstrations calling for fewer liberties, corrupt courts, government-controlled press, or greater power for repressive rulers. The appeal and resilience of the rule of law is undeniable. But also undeniable is that implementing and sustaining rule of law principles and values requires intensive, constant effort. So what can we, a room full of lawyers, do to help? Let me close with a few suggestions, and by asking you to compose your own lists for your country. One thought is that in our increasingly diverse societies, we must avoid extreme polarization. In their book, How Democracies Die, Professors Levitsky and Ziblatt state, without qualification, that extreme polarization can destroy democracies. And if polarization becomes hateful or violent, it becomes even deadlier. Ideological intransigence frustrates problem solving and can gridlock legislatures. Governance requires listening skills, respectful dialogue, and seeing that creative compromise can be both a sign of strong leadership and a practical necessity. We might all ask ourselves, when did we last invite someone for a meal, someone with whom we strongly disagree, to share a meal so that we could better understand one another's views? Second, we must all understand rule of law concepts and appreciate their many benefits. In my country, this will require a renaissance in civics education. The privilege of self-government requires that we be informed and involved, individually and collectively. If we are not, then self-government becomes an oxymoron. As Richard Haas has reminded us, we cannot leave politics just to the politicians. As lawyers, we must be knowledgeable educators on the practical daily benefits of the rule of law. Third, in an age of misinformation, social media, and artificial intelligence, we must become skilled at recognizing misinformation. False distortions of reality, once known as propaganda, have for some become a style of advocacy. Issues governments must deal with are complex enough without multiple versions of the facts. Truth is even more elusive when countries like Russia not only use misinformation against adversaries, but also to manipulate their own populations. Misinformation is a challenge of our time, one that may best be confronted not by trying to censor falsehoods, but by identifying, verifying, and publicizing the truth. Fourth, and then I will stop and urge you to continue on your own, is defending independent media and courageous journalists. Journalism's goals of fairness and objectivity are themselves challenging, but a free and diligent press is an immensely valuable safeguard for rule of law societies. These are among the reasons that today's symposium and our being here are important. And after we leave today, we must remember that we lawyers are the ones who are the guardians and the protectors of the rule of law. Like Ukrainian lawyers documenting war crimes or American lawyers opposing a ban on Muslim immigrants, we must be the first to speak out. When the rule of law is threatened, we must be the first responders. The rule of law needs us. Thanks very much.